Most men spend years trying to figure out what makes a woman think about them. Replay conversations, checking their messages, wondering if they said the right thing or if they should have said more. And the truth is, the more effort they put into trying to impress, the more invisible they become. Because attraction doesn't work the way most people think it does. It's not about having the perfect face, the perfect body, or the perfect lifestyle. It's not about money. It's not about status. And it's definitely not about memorizing lines you found somewhere online and hoping they magically work. In fact, some of the most attractive men you'll ever see are not the most good looking, and they're not the richest either. But they have something else. Something most men completely overlook. They know how to create a feeling. And once a woman feels something real with you, something emotionally different, something she doesn't experience with everyone else, that's when she starts thinking about you when you're not there. That's when you stop being just another guy in her messages and start becoming the one she can't quite figure out why she's drawn to. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There are 5 simple words that can trigger that shift. Not in a manipulative way, not in a forced way, but in a way that taps directly into how attraction actually works on a psychological level. And no, these are not random words. They work because of what they represent. They communicate confidence without arrogance. They show desire without neediness. And most importantly, they make a woman feel seen without you trying too hard. But here's the part almost nobody tells you. It's not just about saying the words, because 2 men can say the exact same thing and get completely different results. One gets ignored, the other becomes unforgettable. Why? Because one understands the psychology behind it, and the other is just repeating words without meaning. So, in this video, I'm not just going to give you the 5 words. I'm going to break down why they work, how they affect her emotionally, and how you use them in a way that feels natural, not forced. Because once you understand this, you won't need to overthink your conversations anymore. You won't need to guess what to say next, and you definitely won't need to chase attention. You'll become the kind of man who naturally creates it. And by the end of this, you're going to understand the difference between being a man she forgets and being the one she keeps thinking about, even when you're not around. Now, let's get into it. Let's be honest for a second. Most men don't get rejected because they're unattractive. They get ignored because they're predictable. They say the same things in the same way, with the same energy as everyone else. Hey, how are you? What are you up to? You're beautiful. And on the surface, there's nothing wrong with these messages. They're polite, they're safe, they're normal. But that's exactly the problem. They're too normal. There's no emotional impact, no direction, no sense of presence behind the words. It feels like the message could have been sent by anyone. And when something feels generic, it doesn't stay in her mind. It gets lost. And here's where most men make the mistake. They think if they just try harder, say more, or be extra nice, they'll stand out. So they double text. They over-explain. They try to keep the conversation alive at all costs. They become overly available, overly agreeable, always trying to say the right thing so they don't mess it up. But what they don't realize is that behavior slowly drains attraction. Because instead of creating curiosity, it creates pressure. Instead of showing confidence, it shows uncertainty. And instead of leading the interaction, they hand over control completely, hoping she'll decide where things go. Now, think about it from her perspective. If every guy is trying to impress her, trying not to offend her, trying to win her approval, then none of them actually stand out. They all blend together. And when a man blends in, he becomes forgettable. Not because he's not good enough, but because he never gave her a reason to feel something different. You see, attraction isn't built through logic. It's built through emotion. And emotion comes from contrast, from experiencing something that feels different from what she's used to. This is why the men who naturally attract attention aren't the ones trying the hardest. They're the ones who communicate differently. They don't speak to impress. They speak with intention. There's clarity in what they say. There's direction. There's a sense that they know exactly what they want, and they're not afraid to express it. And that alone changes everything. Because when a man communicates with certainty, it immediately separates him from the crowd. It signals that he's not there to chase. He's there to choose. And that shift, even though it seems small, is powerful. It changes how she perceives you. It changes how she responds to you. And most importantly, it changes how she remembers you. So, before we even get into the 5 words, you need to understand this foundation. If your communication feels like everyone else's, you'll get the same results as everyone else. But the moment you start speaking with clarity, with direction, and with emotional intent, you stop being just another option. You become an experience. And that's exactly what these 5 words are designed to create. Now, let's break down the psychology behind why they work so effectively. Now let's go deeper, because if you don't understand this part, the words won't work the way they're supposed to. Attraction is not logical. It doesn't happen because someone checked all the boxes on paper. It doesn't happen because a man said the correct sentence or followed some perfect formula. If that were the case, every man who memorized lines would be successful. But that's not reality. Attraction is emotional, and more importantly, it's subconscious. Which means a woman often doesn't sit there thinking, I like him because he said this exact thing. What actually happens is she feels something first, and then her mind tries to make sense of it after. That feeling is what matters. And the male mistake is this. Most men communicate in a way that only engages logic. They ask questions. They exchange information. They try to keep conversations going. It feels like a back and forth interview, not an emotional experience. And when there's no emotional stimulation, there's no attachment. Now, here's where things start to shift. The human brain is wired to respond strongly to 2 specific signals in communication: certainty and recognition. Certainty means you know what you want. Recognition means you see and acknowledge the other person in a meaningful way. When those 2 elements are present together, something powerful happens. The brain starts to associate that interaction with emotional safety and excitement at the same time. Safety because you're grounded, clear, and not confusing. Excitement because you're direct, intentional, and different from the usual passive communication she experiences. This combination creates what psychologists often refer to as an emotional imprint. It's that lingering feeling someone leaves behind after the conversation ends. You've probably experienced it before without even realizing it. You meet someone, you talk, and later that night you find yourself thinking about them again. Not because they said something extraordinary, but because the interaction felt different. That's the imprint. And this is exactly what most men fail to create. They focus on keeping the conversation alive instead of making the conversation memorable. Now, here's where the 5 words come in. These words are not powerful because of how they sound. They're powerful because they naturally trigger both certainty and recognition at the same time. They send a clear signal. I know what I want. And at the same time, I see something in you that I value. When a woman feels both of those in one interaction, her brain doesn't just process it as conversation anymore. It processes it as an experience. And experiences are what people remember. This is why 2 men can talk to the same woman, and one gets forgotten while the other stays on her mind. It's not about who talked more. It's about who made her feel something real. So, as we move into the actual words, don't just think of them as phrases you're going to repeat. Think of them as tools that activate a deeper emotional response when used with the right intention. Because once you understand that, you're no longer guessing what to say. You're creating impact on purpose. And now, let's get into the first part of the 5 words. Now, we get into the first part of the 5 words. And this is where most of the shift begins. I want you. Simple, direct, no confusion. But don't underestimate how powerful this actually is. Because most men never communicate like this. They hint, they suggest, they test the waters. They say things like, maybe we could hang out sometime. Or, if you're free, we could do something. And on the surface, it sounds fine. It sounds polite. It sounds safe. But underneath, it communicates hesitation. It tells her you're unsure. It tells her you're waiting for approval before you even express what you really want. And that immediately lowers the emotional impact of what you're saying. Now, compare that to a man who says, I want to see you again. Or I want to take you out this weekend. There's no guessing. There's no confusion. There's direction. And that direction is what creates attraction. Because when a man clearly expresses what he wants, it signals something deeper than just interest. It signals confidence. It shows that he's comfortable with his desires, that he's not afraid of rejection, that he's not trying to hide behind vague language just to protect himself. And that energy is felt instantly. You see, attraction isn't just about what you say, it's about the certainty behind it. When you say, I want you, in the right way, you're not asking for permission. You're presenting intention. And intention is powerful because it creates structure in the interaction. It moves things forward. It positions you as someone who leads instead of someone who follows. Now, let's be clear about something. This is not about being aggressive. It's not about forcing or coming across as entitled. There's a big difference between pressure and presence. Pressure feels like you're trying to take something. Presence feels like you're offering direction. And women can feel that difference immediately. When it's done right, I want you. It doesn't feel heavy. It feels attractive. It feels grounded. It feels like you're comfortable in your own space. And here's something most men don't realize. When you communicate with that kind of clarity, you actually make things easier for her. Because she doesn't have to guess what you mean. She doesn't have to decode mixed signals. She can simply respond to what's being presented. And that creates a sense of ease in the interaction. Now, imagine this. 2 men are talking to the same woman. One says, yeah, maybe we should hang out sometime if you're not busy. The other says, I want to see you this weekend. Let's do something different. Who stands out? It's obvious. Not because one is better looking, not because one is richer, but because one is clear and the other is uncertain. Clarity creates attraction. Uncertainty creates doubt. And in a world where most men are hesitant, the man who speaks with direction automatically becomes different. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think this alone is enough. They think expressing desire is the whole game. And that's where things fall apart. Because if all you communicate is, I want you, without anything deeper, it can start to feel one-sided. It can feel like you're only focused on what you want, not who she is. And that's exactly why the second part of the 5 words is what transforms everything. So now, let's move into the part that creates the real emotional connection. Now, here's where most men get stuck. And this is the part nobody really explains properly. They learn to be more direct. They start expressing what they want. They say things like, I want to see you. I want you. I want to take you out. And at first it feels like progress. Because it is. They're no longer hiding behind hesitation. They're no longer playing it safe. They're stepping into clarity and direction. But then something strange happens. The response they expected doesn't fully come. The attraction doesn't deepen the way they thought it would. Sometimes it even fades. And they don't understand why. Because in their mind, they're finally doing what confident men are supposed to do. But here's the truth. Desire by itself is incomplete. When all a woman feels from you is, I want. It can start to feel one-dimensional. It can feel like she's just an option, like she's being chosen for what she provides, not for who she is. And that creates distance instead of connection. Think about it. Most men already communicate desire, just in different forms. Compliments about appearance, flirtatious comments, subtle hints. It's all centered around wanting something from her. So if you only upgrade your communication to a more direct version of the same thing, you don't actually stand out as much as you think. You just become a slightly more confident version of the same pattern. And women pick up on that quickly. Because attraction isn't just about feeling desired. It's about feeling understood. It's about feeling like there's something about her, specifically her, that caught your attention. Not just her looks, not just her presence, but something deeper. This is why men who only express desire often hit a ceiling. They create initial attraction, but they don't create emotional attachment. And without that attachment, the connection doesn't last. It becomes replaceable. Now here's where it gets even more important. When a man only focuses on what he wants, it subtly shifts the dynamic. It puts all the attention on him, his desire, his intention, his direction. And while that creates attraction, it doesn't create emotional investment from her side. Because she hasn't felt seen yet. She hasn't felt recognized. And recognition is what makes someone feel special. It's what separates any woman from this woman. So when that element is missing, something feels off, even if she can't fully explain it. She might still like you. She might still respond. But the depth isn't there. The emotional pull isn't strong enough to make her think about you later. And this is exactly where most men lose the opportunity to become unforgettable. They stop at desire, when they should be going deeper. Because the moment you add emotional recognition to your communication, everything changes. The dynamic shifts. The interaction becomes more than just attraction. It becomes meaningful, and that's where the real connection begins. So now, let's move into the second part of the 5 words, because this is the piece that transforms interest into something much stronger. Now, we move into the part that most men completely overlook. And this is where the real emotional shift happens. I value you. Not your looks, not just your presence, you. And that difference is everything. Because the moment a woman feels valued for who she is, not just desired for what she looks like, the entire interaction changes. It becomes deeper. It becomes more personal. And most importantly, it becomes memorable. You see, almost every woman is used to being desired, compliments, attention, attraction. That's not new to her. But being truly valued, that's rare. That's what makes her pause and think. That's what makes her feel something she doesn't experience every day. And this is exactly where you separate yourself from every other man she talks to. When you communicate value, you're doing something most men don't have the awareness to do. You're showing that you're paying attention, that you're not just looking at her, you're actually seeing her. Now, let's break this down in a real way. Saying, I value you, doesn't mean you literally say those exact words every time. It's about what you attach it to. It's about recognizing something specific about her that goes beyond surface level. her way of thinking, her energy, her perspective, the way she carries herself, the way she responds to things, something that feels personal, something that feels real, because when your words reflect that kind of attention, it tells her one thing very clearly: you're not just anyone to me. And that message lands differently. It creates emotional weight. Now imagine this. Instead of saying, I want to see you again, you say, I want to see you again. I value how easy it feels to talk to you. Do you feel the shift? It's no longer just about what you want. It's about what you recognize in her. And that recognition is what creates connection, because people are naturally drawn to those who see them clearly. It taps into something deeper, something psychological. We all want to feel understood. We all want to feel like someone notices the parts of us that most people overlook. And when you become the person who does that, you automatically stand out. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're connecting deeper. Now, here's another important layer. When you express value the right way, it doesn't come from need. It comes from choice. There's a big difference between saying something because you're hoping she'll like you, and saying something because you genuinely recognize something about her. One feels like approval seeking, the other feels grounded. And women can feel that difference instantly, because value that comes from need feels light. Value that comes from certainty feels real. So when you combine this with the first part, everything starts to come together. You're not just a man who knows what he wants. You're a man who knows why he wants it. And that's what creates depth. That's what creates emotional pull. That's what makes her think about you later. Not because you tried to impress her, but because you made her feel seen. And that feeling is very hard to forget. Now, this is powerful on its own, but when you combine both parts together in the right way, that's when it becomes something she can't ignore. So let's bring it all together. Now, this is where everything comes together. And this is what most men never fully understand. On one side, you have desire. I want you. On the other side, you have recognition. I value you. Individually, both are powerful, but together they create something completely different. They create balance. And attraction lives in that balance. Because when a woman feels that you want her, there's tension, there's direction, there's that pull of masculine energy that initiates and moves things forward. But when she feels that you also value her, there's depth. There's emotional safety. There's a sense that this isn't just surface level interest. Now combine both, and what you create is a very rare experience. You're not just another man chasing. You're not just another man observing. You're a man who is both intentional and aware. And that combination is what makes you stand out. Because think about what most interactions look like. One man is overly passive, trying not to say the wrong thing, waiting for signals, hoping she leads the direction. Another man is overly aggressive, focused only on what he wants, pushing too fast, skipping over emotional connection. Both extremes fail. One lacks presence, the other lacks depth. But when you combine desire with value, you sit right in the middle. You lead, but you also understand. You express interest, but you also recognize. You move things forward, but you also make her feel seen. And that's where the real attraction happens. Because now the interaction doesn't feel one-sided anymore. It feels balanced. It feels complete. Now let's look at how this plays out in a real moment. Instead of just saying, I want to see you again, you say, I want to see you again. I value how different you are to talk to. That one small addition changes everything. It turns a simple statement into an emotional experience, because now she's not just hearing that you want her, she's feeling why you chose her. And that why is what creates the imprint. That's what makes her replay the moment later. That's what makes her think, there's something different about him. And here's the deeper psychological effect. When you communicate this way, you trigger both attraction and emotional investment at the same time. Attraction pulls her in. Emotional investment makes her stay. Without attraction, there's no spark. Without emotional investment, there's no attachment. But when both are present together, you create something that's hard to ignore. Something that feels real, and here's another layer most men miss. When you express both desire and value, you're not putting her on a pedestal. You're not chasing her approval. You're making a choice. You're saying, I want this, and I see something in you that makes it worth wanting. That's a completely different energy. It's grounded, it's confident, it's selective. And people are naturally drawn to those who choose with intention because it feels genuine. It feels earned. Now, this doesn't mean you go around repeating the same line over and over again. This is not a script. This is a way of communicating, a way of showing up in interactions that naturally creates connection. And once you understand this, everything changes. Because now you're not trying to impress, you're expressing. You're not chasing attention, you're creating it. And you're no longer just part of the conversation. You become the moment she remembers after it ends. But there's one thing that can completely destroy all of this if you're not careful. And that's what we need to talk about next. Now here's the part that ruins everything. Even if you say the right words, inconsistency, or more specifically, misalignment between what you say and how you say it. Because here's the truth most people ignore. Words don't carry the message. Energy does. You can say the exact same sentence. And depending on your tone, your body language, and your presence, it can either create attraction or completely kill it. And women are extremely sensitive to this. Not logically, emotionally. They don't sit there analyzing your words piece by piece. They feel whether what you're saying is real or not. So if you say, I want to see you again, but your voice is unsure, your posture is closed, your eye contact is weak, the message doesn't land. It actually does the opposite. It creates doubt. Because your words are saying one thing, but your energy is saying something completely different. And when there's a mismatch like that, the brain automatically trusts the energy over the words every time. This is why some men can say very simple things and it feels powerful, while others can say the exact same thing and it feels awkward or forced. It's not the words, it's the alignment. Now let's break this down in a real way. When you express, I want you, it needs to come from certainty, not loudness, not aggression, just calm, grounded certainty. Your body should be open. Your posture relaxed but confident. Your eye contact steady, not intense in a forced way, but present.